Okay, I had kind of put this on break for a little bit, sort of, because I was trying to do other stuff and trying to get other reactions done. So, yeah, here we go again. I think this is part 2 in this volume. The start of winter socializing. I could feel winter getting closer and closer. Each gust of wind was like hundreds of cold daggers prickling my skin, and even with my fireplace lit, I struggled to leave my blankets in the morning. As of late, I had seen carriage after carriage passing by the temple, going through the nobles' gate to the nobles' quarter. The nobles were evidently moving there in preparation for winter socializing, now that the autumn harvest festival was over. I hadn't noticed them at all last year, since I had been in the orphanage director's chambers, but there was a window in the high bishop's chambers that gave me a clear view of the nobles' gate. So, Fran, what is my winter schedule looking like, I asked. Has Ferdinand told you when I'll be heading to the castle? You will be moving to the castle once the winter baptisms are complete, Fran replied. Zom, who had also come to my chambers to deliver a message from Ferdinand, gave a nod. Traveling between the temple and the nobles' quarter will be difficult with all this snow. Please do take care of yourself. It had been decided that since Ferdinand had finished intensely training the Blue Priest and thus secured Zom's replacement, he would send Zom over to become my attendant. Such was the result of me informing Ferdinand that I wanted one of his skilled attendants since Fran was so busy these days. For some time now, Zom had been helping Fran with his work whenever he dropped by with news from Ferdinand. For that reason, Fran had assured me that he would be a massive help since once he was officially assigned to be my attendant. It seemed that with Gil always in the workshop, my chambers were mostly filled with girls, so Fran was unexpectedly happy to be getting a male co-worker. Alongside his temple work, Ferdinand was using the time he had saved at not going to the Knight's Order and the castle to train Blue and Grey Priests. This training was intense enough that the Grey Priest often said anyone who served him would be turned into a first-rate attendant whether they liked it or not. Yeah, definitely. Ferdinand hadn't needed to rely on potions to keep himself going lately, and in fact seemed to be exceedingly lively. He kept going on about what tasks to give them next, and I was glad to see him having fun cooking up study plans. He wasn't the only one giving out intense instructions, though. His attendants were working hard to train the next generation of attendants. What a reliable bunch. Even Camford and Freetic, the Blue Priests I had recommended, were getting pretty teary-eyed over how grueling Ferdinand's training was, but the amount they were being paid for their work was more than enough to improve their overall quality of life. So they were working hard nonetheless. Incidentally, their attendants were being trained alongside them, too. They had risen forth and deepened their bonds to face the common foe that was Ferdinand, with both master and servant completely throwing themselves at each task. While that was heartwarming to see, I couldn't simply sit still and watch them, or else I would be given work of my own, so I always had to do so stealthily. Lady Rosamine, a delivery from the Gilberta Company has arrived, Fran said with a glance my way. I smiled in anticipation. Today was the day that Mom and Thule will be delivering the hairpin that I was going to wear during my winter debut. I would be going to my hidden room after Fifth Bell to receive it, but in the meantime, I needed to memorize the words to the winter baptism prayer, among other things. I couldn't wait to see them, though, since I had prepared gifts for Thule and Camille. Lady Rosamine, may I ask you to go to the orphanage director's chambers? Fritz asked, calling for me when the time came. He was a calm-looking man with scorched brown hair and eyes who had become my attendant just the other day. Several years ago, Fritz had managed to serve a fairly aggressive Blue Priest within the temple without issue, having developed an impressive amount of calm and patience in the process. In other words, he basically never got emotional. It was always Fritz who stepped in to mediate when Gil and Lutz got into arguments, so he had been something of a supporting pillar in the workshop for quite some time. But even now that he was my attendant, Fritz still went to the workshop every day with Gil, so I generally only saw him in the morning and during evening reports. Not to mention, he was one of the great priests whose minds had been thoroughly corrupted by the saint propaganda. He always got super nervous in front of me, speaking rigidly and with an equally stiff smile. Monica, Fritz, pay close attention to her walking speed. Furthermore, do not forget the items Fran instructed. Understood. And so I headed for the orphanage director's chambers with Monica, Fritz, and my guard knights. Upon my arrival, Gil returned from the front gate with Lutz, Mom, and Thule. My apologies for the wait, Lady Rosamine. We may speak in the other room. Monica, please hand the box to Gil, I said, before looking over at Daniel. He nodded at my silent instruction, at which point Bridget took a step back. Monica then did the same once she had given Gil the box. We stepped into the hidden room, and only once the door was completely sealed behind us did Lutz delicately set his own box on the table and open it. Here are the delivered goods, he said. Please look at your leisure. Lutz was much better at taking the hair sticks up this time than he had been before, so I could guess that he had been practicing with Thule. The hair stick itself was decorated with large flowers that were a deep red to match the divine color of winter. They were gathered with lace into a bouquet just as I had ordered and adorned with bird feathers of a radiant white. The other divine color of winter. Those two colors would match the outfit that I was planning to wear during my winter debut. The red and white design of the outfit kind of makes me look like Santa, though. I understood why winter has two divine colors, but did it really have to be those two colors of all colors? My outfit was mostly red, with white fur around the neck and wrist for warmth. I had wanted to reject the design in all honesty, but Riarda had looked so excited as she picked it out that I had completely missed my opportunity to speak up. Not that anyone would have understood my misgivings anyway. Exactly as ordered, I said. May I ask you to put it on me? Mom stuck the hair stick in with a smile, and when I asked whether it looked good on me, Thule pumped a fist and exclaimed, "Of course!" But as a nostalgic smile started to spread across my face, Daniel cleared his throat, prompting Thule to hurriedly correct himself. "It looks very good on you, milady." "Of course it does. Anything you make looks good on me, Thule," I said with a smile. At that, Thule returned a smile of her own, one that very clearly seemed to say, "I know, right?" "Lady Rosamund, my husband was overjoyed to have been assigned to guard the priest at Haas," Mom said. "And thanks to your bonus, it seems the soldiers at the gate often fight over who would be picked to accompany him." He also said the food at the monastery was super tasty, Thule added, both her and Mom keeping an eye on Daniel's expression as they spoke. I was glad to hear even that small piece of news. I am glad that they enjoyed it. The priest will be returning to Haas come spring, so I'll be asking the soldiers to guard them once again when that time comes, I replied. They went on to talk about Dad. I spoke about the orphans, and then the conversation naturally progressed onto Camille's growth. He was apparently in the middle of a fierce struggle trying to pull himself up to stand. My only memories of Camille were of him sleeping at home and being carried in front of the temple door, so it really surprised me how quickly he had grown. That said, I had heard from Wilma that Dirk had taken his first steps the other day, so it made sense that Camille would be making progress as well. "Gil?" "This, Lady Rosamund," Gil asked before setting the box that Monica had given him onto the table and opening it. Inside were gifts for Thule and Camille. I took out the ball of cloth that I had made with Delia and Wilma, then bounced it on the table. When I did, the bells that were inside started to jingle. "This ball has bells inside, so I think even babies should be able to enjoy playing with it," I said. "It being made of cloth means it should be easier to grab, and also reduce the risk of any potential injuries. Do you think it would sell in the Gilberta Company?" From what I would remember, we still had some leftover bells at home. I was pretending this ball was an example for Thule to work from, but in reality, it was a present for Camille. Mom promptly accepted it, having guessed my true intentions. "Furthermore, as thanks for the hair stick, I would like to give you this, Thule. Please read it when you have the time," I said, handing Thule a volume of our third picture book. It was a little thicker than usual thanks to the letter I had slipped inside, which Thule noticed as soon as she took it. She didn't open the book, but her lips curled upward ever so slightly as she slipped it into my old tote basket along with the cloth ball. As I looked at the basket, surprised that they were still using it, I noticed Mom staring at me. She reached out a hand but pulled it back with a clouded expression before giving an awkward smile. "Lady Rosamund, the upcoming season will be cold and harsh. Please take care and watch your health so that you do not end up bedridden with a fever," she said. "The same to you. May you and your family be safe." After the autumn coming-of-age ceremony had ended, on a morning where snow had started to pile up on the streets, the winter baptism ceremony began. My family was nowhere to be seen since I had told them not to come in case Camille got sick. But let's mention that Camille had been very excitedly playing with his new cloth ball, so I was more than satisfied. Once the winter baptism ceremony was over, Ferdinand and I informed the blue priest in the temple what they would be doing in our absence. Camphor and Freetic let out dying wheezes upon seeing the pile of work stacked in front of them, but the silent pressure that Ferdinand was exuding forced them to accept it. We quickly finished our preparations, and it was soon time for me to head to the castle. Once Ella and Rosina had gotten into their carriage, I climbed into mine and turned to look at the attendants who had come to see me off. "Gil, Fritz, please take care of the orphanage alongside Wilma, and be especially sure to put your all into the printing that you shall be doing as winter handiwork." "Lady Rosamund, good luck with business," Gil said. I smiled and gave him a nod. I would be selling learning materials to all the noble kids no matter what. "Lady Rosamund, please consider your health above all else, and take care not to push yourself," Fran added. "Thank you, Fran. I hope you all take care of yourself as well." Meanwhile, Ferdinand was giving precise instructions to his own attendants. "Camphor and Freetic are preparing for the dedication ritual, but they will need your assistance," he said. "Understood," his attendants replied. At some point, Ferdinand's attendants all had received diptychs of their own. It apparently all started when Zom asked Fran for one, which was then ordered from Lester Gill. They had since become essential tools not just for my attendants, but for Ferdinand's, Camphor's, and Freetic's as well. Also, who are Camphor and Freetic? If we've seen them in the anime, let me know. That will be all for now, Ferdinand concluded. We shall await your safe return. And so, as snow fell upon Ehrenfest, my living quarters were moved from the temple to the castle. Welcome home, Lady Rosamine. Welcome back, Lord Ferdinand. Norbert, Sylvester's head attendant, welcomed us upon our arrival, before guiding us to the nearest waiting room in the northern building. There we found Riarda, who went on to inform me and Ferdinand of our schedules over tea. The baptism ceremony will be performed 3 days from now on Earth Day, she said. The winter baptism marked the beginning of winter socializing, followed by the debut of all the children who had been baptized that year. And as all the nobles gathered, the children who would soon be joining their ranks would be invited to join. Baptism ceremony. Am I going to be performing that one too? No, since the winter baptism ceremony overlaps with the debut, I will be performing it instead, Ferdinand said. Watch closely, though, as you'll be performing it next year as the High Bishop. So the High Priest will be performing the baptism in the High Bishop's place. Aww, if he hadn't banned me from selling illustrations of him, I could have made a ton of money. What a shame. Oh, you could have. Rosamund, I can tell from the look on your face that you are plotting something rotten, Ferdinand observed, watching me with narrowed eyes. Well, it's not a plot that I can actually execute, so there's no need to concern. I thought about slipping illustrations into the financial reports for the Harshville concert, but Ferdinand had instantly rejected the idea, and when I asked whether I could distribute them for free instead, he just called me an idiot. Milady, you need not think about that right now. Please focus on what I'm telling you, Riarda interjected. During your debut, you will offer up a song to the gods, praying for future protection and gratitude for the growth you have experienced. The order is such that nobles of a lower rank go first, while those of a higher status play later. I'll be playing before Wilfred then. Hierarchy was very important to nobles. Wilfred was the Archduke's son and heir, so as a former archnoble turned adopted daughter, I would be considered beneath him socially. That was why I had assumed that I would play before him, but Riarda shook her head. Oh, really? No, you will be playing last, so as to announce that you have been adopted by the Archduke. There will be nobles gathering here in the winter who were not present for your summer baptism. That would make sense, Ferdinand said with a nod, but that just confused me more. But why? Isn't going against hierarchy a bad thing? Officially speaking, there is no hierarchy between the children of the Archduke, Ferdinand replied. That is why, under normal circumstances, a successor would not have been picked yet. But even then, aren't adopted children on a different level from normal children? You must learn to read between the lines. By introducing you last, we avoid Wilfred playing after you and being unfavorably compared to your performance. Am I correct, Lady Riarda? Ferdinand asked. Riarda had no choice but to nod. My boy, Lord Wilfred, has been progressing so fast you wouldn't believe it, but he hasn't even been practicing for a single season, whereas you've been practicing for years, milady. Everyone will notice how much better you are at the Harshville you are than him. Oh, that's what you mean. Now I understand. Once Riarda had explained what would happen during the baptism and the debut, Ferdinand told her our plans for the dedication ritual. Traveling between the temple and the castle would limit how much time I had for meetings and spending time with the kids. I imagine that there will be many requests to meet with Rosamund, but prioritize her health above all else. I trust you to make the proper arrangements, Ferdinand said. As you wish, Ferdinand, my boy. Once the discussion was over, Ferdinand stood up to head to his estate in the noble's quarter. I assumed he would be leaving at once, but he instead glared down at me and started listing off warnings. I'll be leaving potions with the Riarda, but take care to manage your health. Do not go into the bookroom yourself. Have your books brought to you instead. Do not speak directly to nobles you do not recognize. Have your attendant speak to them for you. Furthermore, that should be enough, my boy, Riarda interrupted, clapping her hands together a few times. I can give her such minor instructions myself. Besides, if you list them all off at once, she won't remember them. She's not wrong about that. Yes, I had forgotten that there are others who can keep her on a leash, Ferdinand murmured before leaving the room. The next time we will meet was for the baptism ceremony in 3 days' time. At last, I could spend some time relaxing without him constantly butting in to say one thing or another. A short while after our discussion, I changed clothes and went to check on Wilfred at Riarda's suggestion. Lord Wilfred is progressing shockingly quickly, though he seems to have grown just a little smug lately, which is leading him back into laziness. He truly does resemble Lord Sylvester, Riarda said with a troubled yet nostalgic smile. She had already requested a meeting with Wilfred, so I was led straight to his room. Wilfred, I hear you have grown considerably. May I look at your task list? Sure, take a look. Impressive, huh? Wilfred said proudly, holding out the sheet. Almost everything on the list had been marked off, and I could tell that he had been working fairly hard, but at the same time, it was obvious that being this close to finishing had made him somewhat apathetic. Everyone was probably telling him that he had done well to get this far, and that it didn't necessarily matter whether or not he finished. And while this certainly was impressive to those who were used to Wilford's past behavior, a task list was the bare minimum he needed to accomplish as the Archduke's son. Not completing it would be deemed as failure no matter how close he was. "My, I see you truly are working hard, but it doesn't quite seem like you'll make it," I commented. There were still 5 tasks that hadn't been checked off, which meant that his chances of success were precariously balancing between possible and not possible. But I didn't say that out loud, and instead deliberately framed it as though he had already failed. "That's a shame, but don't feel too down about it, Wilford." My words caused Wilford's eyes to open wide in anger, and a stir spread among his attendants. "What? It's not over yet. There's still time before the debut," Wilford protested. 3 days, you mean? Can you really finish everything here that quickly?" "Of course," Wilford declared. "Let's do it, Moritz." It appeared that my taunting had reignited his motivation, and he called Moritz over before starting to study as fervently as ever. I watched for a short while and then stealthily exited the room with Riarda. Once I was back in my chambers, I had my things from the temple put away while I leisurely read a book that Riarda had brought me from the bookworm. Then, at dinner, Oswald reported that Wilford had completed another one of his tasks. This announcement was met with considerable praise by Sylvester and Florencia. Wilford puffed out his chest and looked at me. "See, Rosamine, I can do it when I try." "Oh yes, it's very impressive, and as you just implied, you don't get anywhere when you don't try." Realizing this is the most important step that you can make, I said, to taunt him further. My words earned me a frown from Sylvester, who quickly protested. "Look, Rosamine, you gotta do something about Ferdinand. What do you mean by that?" I hadn't known about this, but Sylvester went on to explain that he had sent several SOS messages to Ferdinand asking for help. They had all apparently ended up being refused in the same way. "Unfortunately, I cannot assist you without the High Bishop's permission." The High Bishop's permission. "So I've been telling him to get your permission, but he just says you're either absent or busy. It's pretty clear that he hasn't been contacting you at all. You know, I think I could see Ferdinand giving one of his evil smiles right now." Oh, I want to see some of this animated so badly. I love it. Even an evil smile, Ferdinand smiling, is still cool. But either way, by permitting Ferdinand to come back to the castle to help out, I will be allowing things to go back right to how they had been before. With all the scholars in the castle, I'm sure you can handle things yourself. The very reason that Ferdinand entered the temple was to signal his withdrawal from the world of politics. So it is strange that he has been visiting the castle and helping with your work at all, I said in rebuttal. No matter how stealthily Ferdinand did the work, it clearly wasn't something he should be doing in the first place. Ferdinand is currently in the middle of quite joyously training replacements in the temple, I continued. I have heard that there was a massive purge that greatly diminished the number of nobles, but Ehrenfest ended up relatively unscathed due to maintaining a neutral position during the Civil War, correct? Now is the best time for us to train newcomers and build strength for the future. They were relying on Ferdinand so much at the moment that there would be countless problems if something were to happen to him. So, in other words, you have no intention of handing Ferdinand over, Sylvester asked. Oh my, that is not the case at all. You may inform the scholars that those who absolutely require Ferdinand's assistance may visit the temple to seek his counsel, I said, knowing that no noble would visit the temple of their own volition unless the situation truly was dire. Well, perhaps one noble would. I can imagine a certain someone gleefully infiltrating the temple in order to explore. Yeah, Sylvester would definitely do that. Unless she's implying someone else. In which case, let me know. Rosamund, you must know that Sylvester needs him, Florencia began, but I shook my head. Florencia, dearest mother, your worries are unfounded. The one and only Ehrenfest would never be so weak as to give up on his work. Well, his own son is striving to one day become the Archduke himself, I said, landing a powerful blow. Sylvester averted his gaze with a pout like that was just like his son's, at which point Wilford looked up with a glint in his eye and eagerly tried to counter me himself. Father's incredible, Rosamund, he said proudly. No way is he weak. And now it'll be even harder for him to avoid doing his work. Good job, Wilford. Working together though he don't know it. I spent my days practicing Harpspiel for Rosina and playing the role of a taunting sibling to motivate Wilford, and soon enough, the morning of the feast where all the nobles in Ehrenfest would gather had arrived. I was washed as early as I usually would be before a baptism ceremony, ate my breakfast, and then had my hair done while dressed in my debut outfit. Once everything was ready, we moved from the northern building to a room in the castle's main building that was close to the big assembly hall. We had made sure to do it part extra early to account for how woefully slow I was and to avoid the looks of sheer bafflement that anyone who saw my high beast would surely give us. I was with Riarda and Rosina, the latter of which was carrying my Harpspiel, and will be waiting in the room for debuting kids until third bell. Cornelius and Angelica were my guards for the day, and both were wearing dark yellow capes clasped with brooches. I had seen the members of the Knights Order in similarly colored capes during last year's Trombay extermination. I see you and Angelica are wearing matching capes, I said to Cornelius. Is that a cape for knights? No, Ob Ehrenfest gives these capes and brooches to all those who enter the Royal Academy, so all those you see wearing them today are its students, he replied. They were apparently like a school uniform for the Royal Academy. When I asked for more information, I was told that a golden yellow similar to ochre was the official color of Ehrenfest, and that students from other duchies would be wearing capes that were their own duchy's color. You're here early, Rosamine. Good morning, Wilfred. Wilfred came to the waiting room, and soon enough other nobles started to arrive with their children. We were sitting at the far end of the room while Riarda and Oswald handled those coming in. The kids were our age, but we had been instructed not to talk to them. Doing so would have political implications due to their parents' status. Oh, there's a girl! I smiled and waved, but she just returned an uncomfortable look. It would probably be best for me to hold back here. I turned my gaze to the outside the window where I saw the high beasts of nobles clad in riding gear arriving one by one alongside carriages. 8 kids came to the waiting room in total. There had been around 10 kids on average across the previous year, so this was definitely less than usual. At third bell, Wilfred stood up and held out a hand toward me like a gentleman, a tense look on his face. Let's go, Rosamund, he said. Shut up! Let's go, Rosamund, he said. It seemed that he would be escorting me to the assembly hall. He started to lead the way, but his fairly quick pace forced me into a jog. I thought back to the time where he had pulled me along until I fell unconscious, and pulled on his arm a little to try and prevent history from repeating itself. Wilfred, please do not walk quite so fast. If you think this is fast, you need walking practice more than you need horsebill practice, he replied. I remarked. You may be right, but either way, it's too late for that now, I replied with a shrug. And at those words, Wilfred grinned as though all of his worries had melted away. When we arrived, the kids all lined up by the doors to the assembly hall. As children of the Archduke, Wilfred and I were standing at the very front. Once inside, please walk straight until you reach the altar, Owen, Oswald said. Wilfred and the other children and I all responded with nods, then Oswald and Riarda opened the doors to the assembly hall. Welcome, new children of Ehrenfest, Ferdinand declared in a loud, echoing voice. A large crowd of nobles than I had ever seen before all turned to look at us, their eyes so full of curiosity and judgment that I faltered for a moment in fear. Judging by his expression, Wilfred seemed to be feeling the same way. I swallowed hard and slightly tightened my grip on his arm, which snapped him back to his senses. He looked at my way, and our eyes met. Let's go, he said, and after exchanging a nod, we both took a step forward. Okay, the baptism ceremony and our winter debut. The situation was much like the Starbind ceremony, except now there were far more judgmental gazes sizing me up as I walked down the middle of the hall. The tempo of the music being played made me feel as though I was being hurried on, and I desperately moved my legs to avoid falling behind Wilfred. Among the audience, I could see some wearing knights' uniforms like Karstead, others in the clothes of scholar officials like Justice, and still others dressed in the attire of attendants. The rest were adorned in a variety of rich, frilly outfits. My analysis of what people were wearing led me to believe that one's placement in the hall was dependent on rank. Lay nobles were positioned closest to the entrance, while those of the highest rank were by the altar. It seemed that the knights and scholars were together, but they were all accompanied by fancifully dressed women and children wearing their Royal Academy capes, or otherwise just their best outfits. In other words, families were sticking together. I wonder if my brothers and mother are together up ahead, I pondered. And it wasn't long before I found Elvira up at the very front row near the center, with Eckert right behind her. Lambert and Cornelius weren't with them since they were on guard duty. But the altar was at the center of a stage, and Ferdinand was standing before it wearing his ritual priest robes. Sylvester and Florencia were to his left, facing the stage along with their guard knights and attendants. I noticed them both looking this way along with Karstead, so I gave a smile. Rosina and the other musicians with their harpspeels were to Ferdinand's right, also facing the stage, and beside them were a number of nobles holding magic rings. Cornelius, Angelica, and Lamprecht were also close by, which told me that the nobles gathering were those related to the kids being baptized. Ah, I see. I'm the Archduke's daughter now, so Mother and Eckert don't get to be with my family or retainers. Instead, they were both with the other regular archnobles. The fact that they weren't able to be included in my family made me feel kind of sad. I wonder where Riarda and Oswald are, I thought, noticing that they hadn't come in through the entrance doors and weren't beside the stage. I searched around for them and eventually saw them come in through another door. The crowd separated for them as they entered, and in no time at all they were lined up by the stage as well. When we stopped in front of the stage, Ferdinand gestured for us to climb up the altar. We promptly obeyed and lined up before it. 4 children were to be baptized, among whom were those who lived so far away from the city of Ehrenfest that they weren't able to invite a priest over during their birth season. While there were several kids, the whole process was just as it had during my own baptism ceremony. Ferdinand recited tales from the Bible with his reverberating voice, then called each child by name. Feline, he said, and a girl stepped forward. It was the same girl who had given me an uncomfortable look in the waiting room earlier. She gripped the magic stick that he held out, the same mana-sucking tool that I held during my baptism ceremony. And once it began to shine, the nobles clapped in celebration. I could guess that if one was so lacking in mana that they couldn't make the tool shine, they wouldn't be accepted as nobles. Babies had their mana measured at birth, and throughout their childhood as they grew, so it was exceedingly rare for that to happen. With that done, the magic tool was pressed against a metal to register her mana. A child was recognized as an Ehrenfest noble only once this process was complete. Pauline's father stepped up onto the stage, then gifted his daughter a ring into which she could release her mana. I bestow this ring upon Pauline, my daughter who has been accepted by the gods and society. May Pauline be blessed by Gadul, the goddess of earth, Ferdinand announced, and with his blessing rained down upon her, she filled the small face stone in her ring with mana, and returned the blessing and thanks. A small red light bounced through the air toward Ferdinand, and the nobles clapped once again. What? Everyone's happy with a blessing that tiny? Well, I mean, yours is just crazily insane. This is normal. It was entirely different from the blessing that my guardian trio, Ferdinand, Sylvester, and Karsta had made me give during my own baptism ceremony. There had been 200 nobles present there, and I had blessed every single one of them. Well, that explains why the crowd freaked out so much. The blessing I gave was clearly abnormal. Had I known what noble baptism ceremonies usually look like, I never would have done something so weird. But no matter how much I regretted it, there was no going back now. And not to mention Ferdinand would have made me do it regardless to further his plot of establishing me as a saint. I couldn't imagine a single reality in which I beat him. Yeah, he's way too smart for you. Once the kids had all been baptized, it was time for the debut. This was a celebration for the kids who had been baptized during the year and accepted into the ranks of the nobles, where we could offer up music to the gods and pray that they continue to provide their divine protection. Each child will usually perform a song in honor of the god associated with the season they were born in. We were moved to the left side of the stage while one of Sylvester's attendants set a chair in the center. Then Ferdinand called Pauline's name, signifying that she was to play first. Considering what Riarda had said earlier, this meant that she was the lowest in status out of all of us. Pauline wore a nervous expression as she sat down in the chair, at which point her music teacher stepped onto the stage with her harpspiel. Pauline took the instrument, then readied it. Wait, what? She's not very good at all. I had assumed that Pauline's poor playing was just a one-off case, but the next couple of children weren't very good either. By the time we were halfway through the performances, all I could do was tilt my head in confusion. If this was the quality expected during a noble's debut, then why in the world had Wilfred and I worked so hard? The level of artistry demanded from nobles was a lot lower than I expected, or so I thought. The second half were increasingly better, their talent seemingly proportionate to their status. There was a world of difference between how their harpspiel sounded, and I immediately realized what was going on. This is the difference that having more money to put in education makes. The more money you can put into that sort of thing, the better you could get. The pieces had all come together. If the highest status children performed first, then it would just be sad for the lower status kids who had to play after them. Nobles were expected to be as good at playing harpspiel as both their tutors and the quality of their instruments would allow, and that was why Wilfred and I were expected to play at such a high level. We wouldn't be able to maintain our dignity and social position if we were raised amidst the highest quality teachers and harp instruments, yet still couldn't play better than those of a lower status than us. The archnoble kid was as good as you would expect. He was slightly better than Wilfred, who had been practically whipped into shape overnight. But the difference wasn't large enough that people would outright look down on him. I bet you're glad you're practiced now, aren't you, Wilfred, I said. I asked, and he nodded with a stiff expression. Ferdinand called out his name. Don't worry, you can put a lot of hard work into this. I gave Wilfred an encouraging pat on the back, inspiring him to step up onto the stage and toward the center. Once he was seated, his music teacher brought him his harpspiel. Wilfred took the instrument, readied it, and then began. The fact that he could play so well when it really counted and was able to stay calm despite all the judgmental eyes was probably a sign that Sylvester's blood ran through his veins. He was regally playing the harpspiel amid a massive crowd, the very instrument image of an archduke's son. I glanced to the side and saw Florencia watching Wilfred with a smile, tears forming in her eyes. Her gaze was so full of dazzling motherly love that I couldn't help but remember my own mom, and a pang of jealousy shot through my heart. Wilfred stumbled a few times, but ultimately kept his cool and finished the song without issue. When he was done, he stepped down from the stage with the satisfied smile of a job well done. Rose mine, Ferdinand announced. Just as the other kids had, I went to the center of the stage and sat down. From there, it was impossible not to see the huge crowd of nobles lined up to the assembly hall. I had heard that there was a total of 800 nobles across Ehrenfest, but it honestly looked like there was a lot more I looked around the hall and made eye contact with Elvira and Eckert in the front row. They were both giving me calm smiles, showing their complete confidence in me. Justice was also there, positioned right beside Eckert. It was actually Daniel and Bridget who looked nervous, while Cornelius and Angelica were looking at me with anticipation in their eyes. Riarda gave me a smile and a small nod to help me relax. While I was looking around the hall, Sylvester began explaining to the nobles the circumstances behind my adoption, going on to tell an even more exaggerated account of what had happened during my baptism to fuel the saint legend even further. "Stop it! Don't hype them up," I exclaimed on the inside, all the while maintaining the calm smile of a noble. His embarrassing introduction ended just before the strange look from the audience made me lose my composure, and Rosina walked up onto the stage of my Hartspiel. "With your talents you will do just fine, Lady Rosemine," Rosina said with an encouraging smile, "and don't forget to smile and thank the gods," she added in a whisper, before turning around and returning to her position. As instructed, I forced a smile on my face while writing my Hartspiel. "Now then," Ferdinand announced, "pray to the gods and offer them a song." Since I would be offering a song to the god associated with the season I was born in, I would be playing for Leidenschaft, the god of fire. It was a song that I was very familiar with and used to playing, but the small prank I had played on Ferdinand was backfiring big time. I've really dug my own grave here. The song he made me practice for this is the anime song I had him arrange. Forgive me, oh mighty Leidenschaft. I put as much heart into this as I can. Oh dear. Yeah, it's kind of backbiting it, but... While apologizing silently, I began playing with all my heart so as to not disrespect the gods, pouring my absolute everything into the singing. But as the song went on, I could feel my mana being sucked into my ring, just as it had been when I said a prayer for a blessing. What's going on? The mana swelled as I continued to sing, quickly turning into a full-on blessing. I hurriedly stopped its flow, but it was too late. A blue light shot out of my ring, turning into a blessing above the stage before raining down upon the assembly hall. Those in the audience all looked my way wearing expressions of shock, awe, and confusion. I glanced over at Ferdinand for help and saw that he was rubbing his temple with his eyes tightly shut. Judging by the look on his face, I had just done something I really shouldn't have. Oh no, she didn't do it on purpose! What the frick happened? What happened? That's not a magic tool she's holding, so I don't know what happened. I wasn't sure whether it would be okay for me to stop playing the song midway through, so I decided to continue, but when I was done, I received barely any applause. Most of the crowd seemed uncertain about how to react at all, and the only ones clapping were those who knew me personally. "I'm sorry for making this awkward, I didn't mean to." I handed my Hartspiel to Rosina, then slowly stood up as Ferdinand came striding over. I looked up at him, wondering what he was going to do, only for him to pick me up and hold me high into the air. "Behold, the saint of Ehrenfest. May she be blessed for the wealth and glory she brings to our home," he declared, and at once the nobles all held their staffs into the air. The light of blessing swelled above them, and I could see many people in the audience nodding to themselves. "So she was a saint after all," I heard one person say. "God, Ferdinand exploited this to spread the legend of me being a saint even quicker." As I stifled a gasp, Ferdinand ordered me to smile and wave under his breath. I did as he said, forcing the elegant smile that I had been trained to give, and waving elegantly, which this time earned me deafening applause. Ferdinand carried me down from the stage and strode out of the assembly hall, all while I was continuing to smile and wave. He was walking quickly with long strides, and only once we were in a side room did he finally set me down. "Rosemine," he said, picking out the sound-blocking magic tool from the various tools clicking about on his belt and pushing it into my hands. I gripped onto it, and once it was activated, we both let out simultaneous heavy sighs of exhaustion. Then Ferdinand glared at me. "Rosemine, explain that blessing," he demanded. "I have no idea what happened," I replied. My song turned into a blessing on its own. If anything, I wanted him to explain to me what had just happened. Upon hearing my answer, Ferdinand frowned and crossed his arms in thought. "But that's never happened when you were practicing correct. Why would your song turn into a blessing now of all times?" "Well, I've never actually prayed while practicing," I said quietly, going on to add. "During practice, I'm always so focused on moving my fingers and keeping up with the notes that I don't actually pray." Ferdinand started lightly tapping a finger against his temple. "So you believe this happened because you were praying sincerely?" "Yes, it felt like my ring was sucking up my mana on its own, and while I had stopped the flow as soon as I realized, it was a little too late. I think I should play well without wearing the ring in the future," I said. "The mana had been sucked out of me because I had the ring on, so taking it off would in theory solve everything." However, Ferdinand shook his head at my suggestion. "It would be unthinkable for a baptized noble to not wear a magic ring. You have two choices. Hone your mind such that the mana does not leak out at all, or accept your fate and play the role of a saint. Consciously stopping the mana would be pretty hard. It usually gets sucked out of me so quickly they don't even realize what's happening until it's too late. And anyway, do we even need to keep up with the saint stuff anymore? I thought that was just to make my adoption go more smoothly," I said with a pout. For a second, they gave me a quiet look. It will be useful to have an explanation as to why you are so abnormal. Nobody will ostracize a saint with such an abundance of mana who serves the duchy as well," he said with lowered eyes, indirectly implying that unless I proved useful to the duchy, my large amount of mana would most likely lead to me being ostracized or vilified. The bitter pain evident on his expression left me unable to do anything by my lip. A knock came on the door, and Riarda entered soon after. "The assembly hall is buzzing with the ceremony, so we've moved straight on to lunch for now. Ferdinand, my boy, get changed as soon as you can." At that, Riarda took me to the dining hall, praising me for a job well done along the way. She even went so far as to casually mention that she had known I was a very special girl after witnessing my baptism ceremony, the Starbond ceremony, and my involvement in Wilfred's education. "There's not many nobles who know you, my lady, so the majority were shocked at your blessing. But we who know you were all unsurprised. You have established yourself as a worthy member of the Archducal family, so there is no need for you to feel worried about showing off your vast quantity of mana," Riarda said to comfort me. Her words eased the burden on my shoulders, and I let out a quiet sigh. We returned to the assembly hall once lunch was over, where the gifting ceremony would be performed. It was a simple event during which capes and brooches were given to new students of the Royal Academy. There were 14 kids that this applied to, which was much larger than my future class of 8. Once there we met up with Rosina, who had been eating lunch elsewhere. She was smiling like always, but I couldn't help but feel that she seemed a little off. "Did something happen, Rosina?" I asked. The worry on her face appeared to deepen. "Lady Rosamine, I was just spoken to by Lady Christine," she said. I blinked in surprise. Christine was the artistic shrine maiden who Rosina had served before me. She had treated Rosina as a friend and provided her a comfortable life immersed in art, which caused problems with my own attendance when I first brought her into my chambers. For that reason, seeing Rosina so anxious after meeting Christine again filled me with increasing worry. "Did she say something to you? Something hurtful?" I asked, but Rosina slowly shook her head. "No, rather she seemed that she intended to come and retrieve me in the future." "What?" I replied, blinking again in surprise. Rosina repeated herself, this time failing to fully hide her joy amid the worry. "She said that she had planned to retrieve me after graduating from the Royal Academy and acquiring more freedom. Neither did she think that I would have become your personal musician, Lady Rosamine. Or never did she think I would." Her blue eyes wavered with delight, and her pleased expression made my heart twist with worry. Would she feel more fulfilled serving a master dedicated to the arts just like her? "Rosina, do you wish to return to serving Christine?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. If she said that she did, then maybe it would be best for me to let her do so. I looked up at Rosina with my hands gripped in front of my chest, and after blinking a few times, Rosina shook her head. "I am satisfied with my current life, and thus have no intention of returning to her service. However, up until this point, I had thought that she abandoned me into the temple. Knowing that she never forgot about me has brought me much peace to my heart." "I see. I'm glad." I really was glad that her wounded heart had been healed, and that she wasn't planning to leave me. As a sigh of relief, Rosina gave a small smile and looked at me with a troubled expression. "You do not need to worry, Lady Rosamine. I am your personal musician, now and forever," she said, having clearly figured out that I was worried about her leaving. I was a bit embarrassed knowing that she had noticed I was a little jealous of Christine, so I averted my eyes and looked for the stage. "The gifting ceremony shall now begin," a scholar announced. All new students of the Royal Academy stepped forward. The voice gave me a good idea of where the stage was, but I couldn't actually see it. The guard knights and attendants around me, not to mention Ferdinand and Elvira, were positioned in a way that prevented others from approaching me, which simultaneously blocked my view of the stage. As I peeked through the cracks between their clothes to try and watch the ceremony, I wondered whether anyone would be willing to let me sit on their shoulders. No, not really. I caught glimpses of Sylvester walking across the stage, giving each student a cape and brooch one by one, and encouraging them to study hard. Once he was done, the scholar announced the individual days that they would be leaving for the Royal Academy. Cornelius and Angelica murmured their respective dates under their breath. Each class apparently went at a different time, so they weren't going on the same day. "Ferdinand, where is the Royal Academy?" I asked. "In the Sovereignty, the region at the center of the country that is ruled directly by the king. You may consider the Sovereignty to be similar to Ehrenfest's Central District, but for the entirety of the country. The students live there during the winter and are transported via a magic circle designed such that it cannot move large groups of people at once. This is why each class travels separately. Once the gifting ceremony was over, conversations could be heard all throughout the hall. Nobles began trading information and the like, transforming the ceremony into a social gathering. I wasn't sure whether I should continue acting as I had been before. Before I could even ask, Ferdinand rested a hand on my shoulder. "Rosamine, you are looking quite unwell," he said. "Oh my, this isn't good at all. I believe it is time for her to rest," Elvira agreed, both her and Ferdinand peering closely at my face. I personally felt fine, but I could tell that they were indirectly ordering me to leave before I caused any more problems, so I left the hall with Riarda and my guards. As we went, I could hear a few whispering voices among the crowd. "That girl truly does have the mana of a saint," one woman said. "I would love to get to know her better." My, it takes more than an excess of mana to be a saint, replied another. That saint is undoubtedly my niece, began one more. Those piercing gazes are actually starting to hurt. The nobles weren't blatantly staring at me, but they were all glancing in my general direction, paying far more attention to me than they had when I first entered. Resisting the urge to look down at my feet or even flee the room entirely, I walked like a noble with my head held high. Okay, how long have I been recording? I'll keep going. A class for kids. During the winter, adults prioritized their social lives above all else. Gives who owned land near the border brought valuable information about neighboring duchies, while the Archduke and his retainers had stories and rumors from the sovereignty, which they had visited during the Archduke Conference. Nobles would gather information from the connections they had formed in the Royal Academy. Gives would discuss their harvests and Fabi's damages with other Gives, and women would attend all sorts of gatherings during which rumors would fly. All in all, there was a lot for the adults to do. In the midst of all that, the baptized kids were gathered together in what was known as the playroom, despite the fact that not much actual playing was ever done there. Since they would be attending the Royal Academy together in the future, this was considered a good opportunity for them to spend time with those who would be their future classmates, juniors, and seniors. Children would select their ideal academy course based on information from their siblings, then form cliques with the other kids planning to take the same course to get a head start with diplomacy. By cutting their teeth here, they could start learning the ways of society before the time came when they had to practice in adult socialization. They was also expected to fully understand who was above and below them in status, as well as how to behave like a proper noble. You will be joining them this year, Lord Wilford, and Lady Rosamine, Briarda said after breakfast as she explained everything that we would need to do. The playroom is a place to select and raise your future retainers. Since those who spend time together in the Royal Academy usually come to trust one another and develop feelings of companionship, retainers tend to be selected from your own age group. Parents will wage what is nothing short of political warfare behind the scenes to secure these retainer seats. So, milady, please do not ever forget that the children you are talking to are very much in the shadows of their parents, she added, a severe expression on her face. I responded with a nod, then got into my high beast and headed to the room where the kids were to gather. I had my 4 guard knights with me today. The current students waiting to leave for the Royal Academy were going to be gathered in the same playroom, which meant that we would need a lot of guards with us until they had gone. On the way to the main building's playroom, we came across a great number of wagons packed with luggage, the belongings of all those who were going to the Royal Academy. I could also see people wearing capes and brooches heading in and out of various buildings. All this stuff is being moved around because the oldest students are leaving today, right? I asked. The oldest students are the first ones to leave every year while the new students leave last, Briarda explained. Who are the people without capes and brooches? The retainers. Students may bring one attendant with them to the Royal Academy. Just as Briarda said, students headed to the Royal Academy with an attendant from their home. I would have thought they would need to bring more people than that, but students could apparently hire those taking the attendant courses to do attendant work, those taking the night courses to be guard knights, and those taking the scholar courses to complete other miscellaneous work. That was why baptized children were so eager to hear about the Royal Academy. The information they received proved important when it came time for them to decide which course they would choose for themselves. As we continued heading to the playroom, those leaving for the Royal Academy did double and then triple takes at my panda bus, but I was so used to the shocked expressions that I marched on without so much as thinking about them. My retainers were used to it as well, and so also continued like it was nothing. Lady Rosamine, this is the playroom where children make social connections over the winter. It will most likely be quite cramped until the students here leave for the Royal Academy. But I'm sure you will manage, Briarda said as she waited for me to put away Leslie, and once I had, she opened the door. In an instant, everyone who had been casually chatting fell silent, turned our way, and then hurriedly knelt. Briarda beckoned me to follow as she headed to a seat at the far end of the room, treating everyone's silent kneeling as a matter of course. I sat in the chair once we reached it, and while Briarda moved to prepare tea, my guard knights surrounded me in a half circle. After that, it was a storm of greetings. The kids lined up and began introducing themselves to me one by one. It is a pleasure to meet you. I am Hartmut, son of Laberrecht. Lady Rosamine, may I pray for a blessing in appreciation of this serendipitous meeting, ordained by the harsh judgment of Overlord, the god of life? Oh, God. Really? It's his freaking season. Oh, great. You may. Oh, Overlord, god of life, may this new meeting be blessed. They were introducing themselves to me in such quick succession that there was zero chance of me remembering every one of their names. The best I could do was listening out for the names of their parents, and then focus on remembering the kids who were related to those marked as needing caution on the former High Bishop's secret list. I did my best. Besenwa's list came in handy too. Bit by bit, the line in front of me started to shorten, and when Wilford arrived, one formed in front of him as well. The kids who greeted us couldn't properly speak to us until everyone in those lines had finished their introductions, so they walked off and started asking the Royal Academy students questions. I could see the students were more than willing to answer, having once been on the asking side themselves. I was enjoying listening in and hearing their questions. Why did you choose that course? What were the lectures like? What were the professors like? And so on. I know that I've been told not to just casually speak to them, but I want to join them discussions too. Once everyone had greeted me, I looked around the room. The only ones near me now were my guard knights. Daniel, why did you decide to become a knight? I asked. My older brother is a scholar, so I thought it would be more useful as a knight, he replied. It made sense that working in a different field could result in more information being collected for the family to use. And since Daniel wasn't as skilled as his older brother at scholar work, there wasn't any particular need for him to walk down the same path. What about you, Bridget? I've been athletic ever since I was a child, and Ilgnir is teeming with small fabies thanks to its mountains and trees. So learning to defeat them earned me the gratitude of all those around me, she explained. Her eagerness to take the lead and fight off any harmful babies for the sake of her home was beyond heroic, and in all honesty, just plain cool. I gave her an understanding nod, thinking back to how intensely she had fought as a knight on the night of Shatsaria, and with that I looked Cornelius's way. Cornelius, why did you decide to be a knight? Father and our brothers are knights, so I've never once considered becoming an attendant or a scholar, he replied. That made sense to me. Family tradition carried a lot of influence. So much so that Karlstedt had even admitted he had no idea what to do with a daughter like me, since he had spent all his time thinking about training his sons for combat. There was no doubt in my mind that he had been merciless when training those to be knights. Finally, I looked at Angelica. She was the one I wanted to hear about most. A little girl with a small frame, she was the complete opposite of Bridget. Her light blue hair and deep blue eyes gave her a much more fairy-like impression, and she looked more like an attendant than a knight. I know that she had a speed-based fighting style due to the work she had done this far, and given that she was being trusted to guard the Archduke's daughter, I knew that she was strong enough to more than hold her own in a fight. But up until this point, I had never gotten the opportunity to ask why she personally wanted to be a knight. Angelica, why did you decide to become a knight? I asked. Because I didn't want to study, she replied on the spot, and upon seeing me blink in surprise, she elaborated with an utterly serious look on her face. Knights don't have to study as much as those in the other jobs. I see. I'm glad that you like to study a lot, Lady Rosemine. The commander said that the mark of a good master-servant pairing is them making up for each other's weaknesses, she continued. Which to me it sounded entirely like, please use your head so that I don't have to. I already guessed that she didn't like studying, which is she didn't particularly enjoy reading books, but the thought had never crossed my mind that she decided to become a knight specifically to avoid it. You really can never judge a book by its cover. Duh. I see that you all have your own reasonings. I personally want to be a scholar and then a librarian who manages the castle's bookroom, I announced. Since I already knew that librarians were selected from a pool of scholars, my plan was to go to the Royal Academy, become a scholar, and then ultimately become a librarian. I was prepared to do whatever it took to make that happen. But sadly, my fantasies of spending all my time in the bookroom were shattered when Bridget began to uncomfortably speak. Lady Rosemine, it is law that you shall be attending the Archduke candidate course. You are the Archduke's daughter, and so this cannot be changed. What? But I'm adopted. I won't become the Archduke. All children of the Archduke become Archduke candidates. I would imagine that is why you were adopted in the first place, she said. The reality was that I had been adopted because I needed enough status to defy Besenwa's, who was backed by Sylvester's mother, and nobles from other duchies, but so as far as the public was concerned, Sylvester the Archduke had adopted me so that my immense mana could be used for the greater good of the duchy. It was set in stone that my mana would be used for Erebeth's sake, and while that was fine with me, I hadn't realized that it meant I would be studying to become an Archduke in the Royal Academy at the cost of not becoming a scholar or librarian. My intention had been to support Wilfred once he became Archduke, all the while modifying the temple's bookroom to my liking, or potentially serving as the castle's librarian. If I can't be a scholar, does that mean I can't be a librarian either, I asked. That is a good question. I have never heard of an Archduke's child becoming a librarian before, Bridget said, faltering slightly. Daughters of the Archduke were expected to support the future Archduke and marry nobles from other duchies to strengthen political bonds. They were not expected to stay at home forever and work as librarians. This can't be happening, I cried silently, and as complete and utter despair overwhelmed me, my vision went black and my consciousness faded away. Lady Rosemine, stay strong. When I awoke, Ferdinand was there. He was looking down at me with his brow deeply furrowed, wearing a thoroughly displeased look. Ferdinand, am I not allowed to become a librarian? I cried, leaping out of the bed I was in with teary eyes. He let out a heavy sigh, not even trying to hide how annoyed he was. I wondered what had happened when Riarda came barging into my aunt meeting with a deathly look on her face. But I see you have worried her over nothing. This isn't nothing. It's one of the most important things in my life, Ferdinand. Will I not be allowed to become a librarian? That was the very reason I started making books myself. So that I could work in a place filled with books, new and old alike. If you say I'm not allowed to be a librarian after all that, I trailed off, crying too hard to continue. What would she even say? What would she even do if she wasn't even allowed to? Because, I mean, hello? What could she do? What could she do against them? Ferdinand looked down at me calmly, tapping a finger against his temple. Calm down, Rosamine. It shall be difficult, but it is not entirely impossible for you to become a scholar. Really? I exclaimed, looking up at my savior Ferdinand, as I immediately clung to the flare of hope he had just offered me. His lips curled into a thin smile. You need only take scholar classes alongside all of your Archduke candidacy classes. So essentially he's telling you to do 2 courses at once. My jaw dropped. He was essentially telling me to major in 2 subjects at once. Yep, doing twice the work that everyone else would be doing. Is that even possible, I asked. There are precedents. It should be within reason for you. Precedents? Are you talking about yourself, Ferdinand? He was the only person I knew who would do something as strenuous as taking the scholar course on top of the Archduke candidate one. And sure enough, he nodded as though he was nothing special at all. Indeed, I was an Archduke candidate as well. I took the course alongside the Scholar and Knight course. Dang! Just what kind of superhuman is he? I know! What kind of superhuman is he? He took all 3 courses! No, there was 4 courses because there's one for attendance. I don't know how many courses there are, but there's at least 4. He took 3 of the 4. Jesus Christ, dude! I had vastly underestimated just how incredible it was that Ferdinand could simultaneously manage scholar work, his responsibilities in the Knight's Order, and assisting the Archduke. I cratered my spinning head. The majority of students stay in the Royal Academy only during the winter, but if you request it, you are allowed to stay during other seasons as well. I remained in the Academy for the entire year, leaving only when summoned, he explained. A teleportation circle meant he could immediately return when needed, and he found the Royal Academy a more comfortable place to be in than the castle thanks to the lack of constant criticism from all sides. He used all his free time to its fullest, ultimately conquering all 3 courses at once. Don't expect me to have your inhuman talents, Ferdinand. I'm just a normal, innocent girl. That's a shame, then. An ordinary person will not be equipped to serve as a librarian. If you are not willing to put in the work, then it is best you give up sooner rather than later. Ferdinand said bluntly, waving a hand as if signaling the discussion was over. The conversation in here meant that my road to becoming a librarian would be closed off forever, and that was something I needed to avoid no matter what. I could never give up on being a librarian, especially before even getting a chance to try it. I clenched my fist in determination and looked up at Ferdinand. He immediately grinned as though he had known from the start that I would never give up so easily. I will never give up no matter what, I declared. Forget all that about me being a normal girl. I'm going to become the weirdest, strangest girl who ever lived. Hold it. You are already bizarre and beyond words. That is the wrong direction to focus your motivation, he said, extending his hand and waving it in front of my eyes as if to seal away my brimming determination. He then went on to inform me what my path would entail, his voice steeped in exhaustion. We shall discuss which classes are best for you to take when the time comes for you to attend the Royal Academy, so take care not to get ahead of yourself and charge forward on your own. Ferdinand continued, in your case, you must focus on making your Jarive and fixing your weak body before anything else. As you are now, you will barely be able to handle the Archduke candidate classes, let alone the Scholar course as well. That's true. In summary, he was telling me to think about Royal Academy stuff when the time came rather than right now. That was fine with me, as long as the road to becoming a librarian was still open to me. I could relax and put it off until later. You are planning to spread karate and picture books among the children to help fund the printing industry, are you not? Put aside the Scholar course for now and focus on that. Okay, I will. A day after all the students had left for the academy, Angelica and Cornelius secluded, I headed to the playroom with a deck of karata, brimming with energy now that I knew Hope wasn't dead after all. Now that all the students have headed to the Royal Academy, it is this group who will be spending the winter together, I said. I have brought toys known as karata here so that we can all play and get to know each other. At that, I divided the kids by year, from ages 7 to 9, and started a karata tournament. Both Wilfred and I mingled with all the 9-year-olds at the start since we were already experienced, and it was needless to say that we absolutely dominated. Wilfred rejoiced at the victory, but the looks on everyone's faces made it clear that they were going easy on us. I was annoyed, but I needed to put on a calm smile and be diplomatic here. We shall have the advantage for some time since we already have some experience, but you will need to win at least once by the end of winter, I said. Otherwise, we could never consider trusting you to be our retainers. Isn't that right, Wilfred? Wilfred looked confused, but all of the other kids immediately tensed up. Their parents had no doubt told them to get close to us with the goal of eventually becoming our retainers. That is, our attendants and knights. But I had no intention of simply having them try to butter us up all winter. Rather, I would be training them. He and I are striving to be worthy lords, but we need only the most skilled of retainers, I continued. Right, exactly, Wilfred agreed. Having sufficiently riled them up, we moved on to playing another game, but the difference in experience was still much too great for them to overcome. Once again, we crushed them. It was safe to say that Wilfred had gotten pretty good at the game, so much that I might have lost him had I not gone all out. He'll probably be able to consistently beat me by next winter. I've got no issue finding the relevant picture cards, I just don't have the arm strength to grab them fast enough. I look forward to playing with you all again, I announced. Starting tomorrow, I shall offer sweets to the best player out of you all. Sweets were usually brought to the playroom already, but those with the highest status ate first, and passed their leftovers to the rank below them. This meant that the low-status kids didn't get to eat much in comparison. Now that these tasty sweets were essentially up for grabs, the kids were staring at the cards even more intensely than before. Since it was only the first day, we had just brought the cards with us, but from the following day onward, we brought everything else that would be required for the kids' curriculum. After breakfast, we had training with the Knight's Order, and while everyone was running laps, I practiced walking. Edgar was following close behind, watching me with eyes like a hawk to make sure I wasn't about to collapse. Come third bell, it was study time. We played cards, I read aloud from picture books, and had the kids read and write according to their skill level. Wilfred now did the entire alphabet, so his task was to write out the contents of a picture book on another sheet of paper. Such was the skill level of a 7-year-old archnoble, and the equivalent was to how much 8-year-old men nobles and lay nobles knew, so he was just barely keeping up as the Archduke's son. Meanwhile, I was reading books from the bookworm, summarizing the contents elsewhere, and starting to write out the text in my next picture book. It really was a blissful time. As for math, on top of our regular lessons, we played card games involving addition like blackjack. Many of the children weren't particularly good at math, so it was admittedly fun to see them frowning hard as they tried to play the game. The kids who showed they were good at math earned some sweets after the games. Everyone then practiced Harpspiel at the same time. Some kids wouldn't get better without talented teachers, so having them be educated by the musicians who served the archducal family, such as Rosina, was a surefire way to ensure some impressive growth. I had been given permission from Florencia to boost the base stats of all the noble kids in the duchy over the winter, and the tutors were all being paid for, so they did their work without any complaints whatsoever. I have never seen such an orderly playroom before, said one attendant, going on to praise both Wilfred and my efforts with a smile. He apparently watched over the playroom each year, mentioning that it had previously been a place where arch-noble children used their status to bully lay-noble kids, forcing the attendants to step in and arbitrate when necessary. Now then, once you've all finished your writing, let us start reading picture books, I said. Since I was dealing with kids who weren't used to studying a lot, I made sure to mix up what we were doing as a regular basis. I roughly approximated this based on when Wilfred started to get bored. And so Lawrence began reading aloud to everyone from a picture book. The books had large illustrations and weren't very text-heavy overall, so the kids all listened with shining eyes to the amplified tales of the gods. Feline, in particular, looked awestruck, her eyes sparkling brighter than anybody else. She was a lay noble who had just been baptized this year. Sporting honey-colored hair and grass-green eyes, and despite generally being very passive and quiet, she always sat up front and looked at the picture book intently when it was time to be read to. The way she was willingly picked up books during her free time and read them with a smile made me like her quite a lot. You know, Feline, it was Rosemine who made those picture books. Impressive, huh? Wilfred said with his chest proudly puffed out, as though he had been the one to make them. Why are you the one bragging? I thought, my polite smile not faltering in the slightest. Feline's cheeks flushed, and she turned to me with innocent, glittering eyes. Lady Rosemine, she said, clasping her hands in front of her chest and wiggling as if working up the courage to confess her love. Only once her resolve had sealed did she muster the courage to continue, her voice brimming with a mixture of hope and desperation. I want to make picture books too. What kind of picture books would you like to make, Feline? Do you know any interesting stories? I asked, more than ready to take under my wing a girl who loved reading books. Shyly placing her hand on her cheek, Feline lowered her eyes. I would like to preserve the stories my mother told me in a picture book. Her birth mother had apparently passed away, and the new woman whom her father was now married to didn't know the same stories. Feline wanted to record the stories that her birth mother had told her so that she would never forget them, which reminded me of when I had desperately tried to make a book of the stories my own mother had told me. I put that project to the side since nobles wouldn't understand them, but now I really wanted to make a short story collection to give to Tully and Camille. In that case, would you tell me the stories? I know you cannot write on your own yet, but I can write them down for you, I said. And so I did. Feline told me the stories that her mother had told her, while I speedily wrote them all down on paper. Her winter homework would be to write copies of all the stories herself. Here we go. Let's finish things off here, and I will see you all next time.